Why did Russia decide to invade Ukraine? The roots of Russia's decision to invade Ukraine go back to the era of the Soviet Union. At that time, Russia controlled a vast expanse of land across Europe, and its borders were much easier to defend. The northern European plain, which runs through much of Eastern Europe, didn't extend as far into Russia, making it harder for invaders to reach the Russian heartland. If NATO had wanted to strike, it would have had to pass through a narrow, flat region in central Germany. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the political and security situation in Europe changed dramatically. NATO, which was originally a defensive alliance, began expanding steadily. In 1999, countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic joined. Then in 2004, NATO added Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. In the following years, Croatia and Albania became members in 2009, Montenegro in 2017, and North Macedonia in 2020. As NATO continued to expand eastward, Russia became increasingly alarmed. Its greatest fear was that Ukraine, which shares a 2,300-kilometer border with Russia, might eventually be invited to join the alliance. For Moscow, that would have been a huge strategic problem. The idea of NATO moving closer to Russia's doorstep was something it simply couldn't overlook. Let's take a look at the timeline from 2014. Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych abruptly pulls back from signing the long-anticipated free trade agreement with the European Union. The decision sparks massive protests across the country, as many Ukrainians see the move as a step away from European integration and a tilt toward Russia. March 2014, with Russian troops already in control of Crimea, the region's parliament votes to secede from Ukraine and join Russia. A public referendum follows, with 97% of voters reportedly supporting the move, though the results are widely disputed by the international community. April 2014, tensions escalate as 40,000 Russian troops amass on Ukraine's eastern border. Violence erupts in the Donbas region, where pro-Russian separatists clash with Ukrainian forces. April 2021, Russia ramps up its military presence near Ukraine, deploying around 100,000 troops to the border. In response, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky calls on NATO to accelerate Ukraine's path to membership, citing growing security concerns. This is a map of Ukraine in the year 2022. The area marked in red shows Crimea, which Russia had already annexed. This is February 2022. At this point, a critical mistake was made by the Russian generals. They assumed that taking Ukraine would be easy and spread their forces across the country. This is the map from March 2022. The areas marked in red and checkered show the rapid advance of the Russian army. However, on November 22nd, this is where things took an unexpected turn. Ukraine fought back fiercely, reclaiming significant ground and shocking the Russian military. By February 2025, the Russian army appears to be making some advances, but at a much slower pace than anticipated. On October 8, 2022, the Crimean Bridge explosion led to a strong Russian retaliation. Nearly 2 years later, on August 6, 2024, Ukraine launched a major offensive inside Russian territory. By October and November of 2024, North Korean troops had joined Russia's war effort. By mid-November, approximately 10,000 North Korean forces were in Russia, with some actively engaging in combat in Kursk. This is Ukraine's invasion cutting through a small town in Sudzha. This caught the massive Russian military by surprise. And what's particularly interesting is that they accomplished this with just a small mechanized brigade. These brigades included around 11 main battle tanks and 20 infantry fighting vehicles, such as the American Bradley and the 8-wheeled armored fighting vehicle Stryker, along with a significant number of FPV drones costing only $1,000 each. These drones can cause havoc and help damage or destroy tanks like the Russian T-90, which costs around $4.5 million each, shifting the tide on the battlefield. The Ukrainian forces, instead of attacking head-on, executed this invasion by maneuvering around heavily defended checkpoints and attacking the enemy from the rear. This strategy caught the Russian army by surprise, while reinforcements were cut off by HIMARS artillery systems, thus enabling them to take over 1,000 square kilometers, which translates to around 386 square miles. Let's take a look at why Russia failed to defend its border. Failure 1. The Russians experienced a complete intelligence failure regarding the Ukrainians. For the last 2 months, Ukrainian troops have been slowly amassing. To avoid suspicion, they began adding troops in small groups over time. Ukraine knew it could not compete head-on with the massive Russian army in its backyard, So instead of launching a direct attack, they adopted a different approach. This gradual buildup allowed them to remain undetected. However, Russian bloggers were already reporting the military buildup to Russian generals. Despite these reports, the activity was dismissed as a deception meant to draw Russian forces away from Pokrovsk into Ukraine. Now, speaking of strategy, let's take a look at how they managed to pull this off. The Ukrainians employed one of the most tried and tested strategies: concentration of force. Given that the Ukrainian army was much smaller than the Russian army, only about 10% of its size, they had to be strategic. Approximately 800,000 Russian soldiers were stationed along the borders, waiting for the right moment to launch an offensive and crush Ukraine. So the Ukrainians counterattacked and identified a weak spot in the Kursk region, mobilized all their troops to execute a flanking maneuver, and focused on taking control of the single checkpoint. After securing it, they regrouped with their current forces and mechanized armor to re-engage and eliminate the remaining checkpoints. They repeated this process over and over until all Russian pockets of resistance were destroyed. To counter Ukrainian advances, the Russians started using drone warfare. They have started using fiber optic drones due to the increasing use of electronic warfare by the Ukrainian army. In short, these are invincible to radar or radio. Let's look at their drones and their various purposes. Orlan drones are launched for surveillance and can penetrate nearly 600 kilometers into a country. The second type of drones are FPV, guided by fiber optic cables. These have a range of only 1 kilometer or about 1.2 miles. Standard FPV or first-person view drones, on the other hand, have a range of 10 kilometers or roughly 5 miles and more. Next are the Lancet drones. These are advanced main battle tank killers, capable of flying for 40 kilometers or about 24 miles. Finally, there are the Iranian Shahed drones, which can travel up to 1,000 kilometers or approximately 620 miles. These drones can cause significant damage when launched in large numbers. Since Russia has been bombing Ukraine for a couple of years, they almost ran out of missiles and started using Soviet-era bombs converted to glide weapons. Sukhoi fighter jets can approach a target closely, staying just outside the range of enemy air defense systems. As soon as the pilot flips the switch, the bomb is released. The safety pin is pulled by gravity as the bomb falls. Initially, the wing kit is upside down. Once the bomb is safely away from the fighter bomber, the wing kit slowly turns and deploys its wings, transforming the bomb into a glide weapon. This conversion gives it a range of up to 70 kilometers, which is approximately 43 miles. The wings can make small, precise adjustments during flight, guided by the GLONASS, the Russian equivalent of GPS, directing the bomb to the pre-assigned longitude and latitude that is the designated target area. We'll also look at how war was fought at the Black Sea. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the attack occurred near Cape Tarkenka in Russian-occupied Crimea. The missile was launched from a Magura V-5 unmanned surface vehicle operated by the Main Directorate of Intelligence's Elite Group 13 unit was launched and took down a Mi-8 helicopter. Reports also suggest that another Russian helicopter, the type of which has not been disclosed, sustained damage but managed to return to its airfield. Let's take a look at how this happened. The missile used in the attack was an R-73A A-11 Archer, or an air-to-air missile, which has now been adapted for a surface-launched naval role under the designation Sea Dragon. This adaptation represents a significant evolution in Ukraine's military capabilities. Video footage of the incident reveals intense combat activity when one of the USVs is seen being sprayed with machine gun fire for some time from this Mi-8 helicopter. It is here the helicopter deployed flares to avoid heat-seeking missiles. And at this instance, the missile from the Ukrainian sea drones was launched. The helicopter then appears to fall and an object is seen crashing into the water. At the later part of the war, Russia started to launch hypersonic or Chinook missiles, changing the tide of the battle. It has been meticulously engineered with multiple stages, enabling it to reach orbit in a few minutes. But what sets it apart from all the rest? Well, this missile can hit hypersonic speed. Once it reaches this altitude, it transitions into a steep dive, accelerating to hypersonic speeds. During its descent, the missile's fairing opens to unveil 6 highly sophisticated warheads. Each warhead is equipped with miniature thrusters at its base. These thrusters enable the warheads to maneuver dynamically, even as they fall under the influence of gravity. It can change directions, making it almost impossible for the Patriot missile to hit its target. The Patriot will not be able to calculate and hit a missile moving in zigzag directions at hypersonic speed. In short, defense systems must not only react faster, but also anticipate and counter unpredictable movements in real time. This is why this missile is special for the Russian forces. We also make original engineering content, so please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos.